Hi everyone! Welcome back to Needle Workshop. My name is Emily and I'm back today with a series of cosplay tutorials for a brand new costume. So we recently published our first pattern from our Last Fable series, which is inspired by Cloud from Final Fantasy Advent Children. You can find the pattern along with the fully written tutorial available for download on our online store, which is linked in the description box below. The written tutorial also includes tons of info on how to properly measure yourself, how to print the pattern, along with material suggestions and the tools used in this tutorial. We worked really hard on this, guys, so once again, please make sure to check it out. Important to know for this tutorial is that if you are using a stretch fabric, which you will, you'll need to sew your garment with an overlock or a zigzag stitch, unless specified otherwise. So when using a stretch fabric, you really want your stitch to have some give. A straight stitch is more likely to snap, while a zigzag stitch just won't. Mind you, in our case, the fabric we used for the shirt was even more particular, and I will elaborate a little bit more on that later. Also, as always, make a mock-up before starting. This allows you to make sure that the fit is right, and it's better to mess up an inexpensive fabric than something you paid like $20 a meter for. Also, if you're making a mock-up of something stretch, make sure that the fabric you are using to make your mock-up is also as equally stretchy. We'd also like to thank Iwood Cosplay for collaborating with us on the production of this costume. He's looking absolutely fantastic in it, and I think I speak for all my team when I say we couldn't be happier. So yeah, make sure to check out his work. Everything is going to be linked in the description box below. And without further ado, let's get started. Before we begin, I want to give a detailed overview of just how tricky it was to work with our current fabric selection. As some of you might already know from our materials overview video, we decided to use an oversized knitted black sweater. This, as it turns out, is a very difficult material option to work with. The reason for this is that the material starts to fray massively the second the pattern piece has been cut out. Because of this, I've had to derail from our current written tutorial to adjust to this particular problem. So please make sure to keep that in mind. The first thing I'm going to do is cut out all of my pattern pieces from my oversized knit sweater. Once the piece is cut out, I immediately overlocked all around the piece to avoid any unnecessary fraying. In this particular case, a zigzag stitch will not be an adequate substitute. You need to properly overlock all of your edges. When overlocking your pieces, you will unavoidably lose the shape of your piece, which is very frustrating and makes the piece very complicated to work with. To help keep everything properly to shape, I'll be using my paper pattern as a template, and with a somewhat brightly colored thread, I will use a straight hand stitch along the edge to help the piece back into its shape and help it keep its shape. This is a bit of added work, but is absolutely needed with this kind of material. Notice how I slightly pull on my thread to force the piece into shape. And in this case, I want to secure my side seam into place with a light knot before moving on to my armhole. Once I've fully secured my piece into place, I can remove the pattern that I was using as a reference. You'll need to do this with all of the pattern pieces with the exception of the collar piece, which is fully interfaced. Now that we've prepped all of our pattern pieces, let's start assembling our shirt. You'll first want to apply a band of 1.5 centimeter wide to the center front of your front bodice, on the wrong side of the fabric. I had already applied my band, but if you haven't done so yourself, please do so now and make sure to overlock the center front afterwards. Take out your back bodice piece and align your left and right front bodice pieces to the back and sew in place 7 mm from the edge at the side seam and at the shoulder seam. For this, I'll be using both a zigzag stitch as well as an additional overlock stitch to attach my pieces together. Keep in mind that the current method I'm using is a variant from the provided instructions due to the very terrible fabric that I've opted for. Next, we'll be folding our facing pieces right side to right side and sewing them to themselves at 7mm from the edge at the side seam. Notice that I've indicated all of my notches with thread rather than the usual cut notch. Align your armhole facing to the armholes of the shirt, right side to right side, making sure to properly align all your notches and the seams, and sew in place 7mm from the edge. Turn your facing inward, pin in place, and stitch in place by hand with a hidden whip stitch. The reason I've opted for a whip stitch is to both keep the stitch completely invisible from the outside, but also to allow the armhole to retain some stretch. That's really important here. You really want to be able to retain some of the stretch. To keep your stitch hidden, you'll need to be sewing through the inner layer of the fabric only. Feel free to practice on a scrap of fabric first if needs be. Optionally, if your fabric is prone to stretching like mine was, you can add a little elastic in your armhole between the shirt and the facing before whip stitching the facing down. The measurement of the elastic should match that of the original armhole. Make sure to mark your notches on the elastic and have them match to those on your shirt when installing it in place. You can whip stitch the elastic to the shirt. Next, let us work on the collar. Make sure your collar is properly and fully interfaced and that all your notches are well indicated. Proceed to overlock one of the longest sides of the collar. Bring your bodice piece back and right side to right side, align the side of the collar with no overlock to the bodice neckline. Sew in place 7mm from the edge and overlock. At this point, I'm doing the very bold move of cracking my red security thread. Essentially, I just pulled on my shirt and broke the thread out of place so that my shirt could get its full stretch potential back. So you can remove all of the broken threads from the seams. As noted in the materials overview video, my zipper for the front of my shirt is too long, so I'll be needing to shorten it. Here is how it's done. You're first gonna need to properly measure the length of your center front bodice. Make sure not to take into account the 1 cm seam allowance at the neckline and the seam allowance at the hem if applicable. I wrote down my number to be sure not to forget. Our zipper will be going up my collar, so I also need to measure the center front of my collar from the notch to the neck, taking into account to remove 1 cm of seam allowance. We're measuring from the notch since my collar will be folded in half later on. Now that I have my full measurement, it's time to transfer those numbers to the zipper. With an open-end zipper, we'll need to shorten from the top since we want to keep the zipper open-ended. Starting from the bottom of your zipper tape, measure out the same amount as the center front bodice, but with 4 to 5 millimeters less for ease. The marking is important since we'll be using it to align to the seam of the collar and bodice. Mirror the marking to the other side of the zipper. From your marking, measure out the measurement of your collar and feel free to remove 3 to 4 millimeters for ease. Again, mirror your marking to the other side of the zipper. As you can see, your zipper aligns with your pattern piece. Make sure to bring down the zipper carrier below your markings. This is actually really important. For the next part, you'll need a pair of pliers and a zipper stopper of the right size. I actually own a few different sizes, so I can easily adapt to any zipper. And they're pretty cheap to be honest, so feel free to stack up on a few. With the proper size selected, go ahead and remove the zipper teeth located right next to your marking. You'll need your pliers to do this. Place your zipper stopper to your marking and squeeze it in place with your pliers. Make sure to squeeze it real good. You don't want it to fall off at any point. Rinse and repeat on the other side. Once you have both the zipper stoppers in place, you'll need to cut off the excess zipper. Make sure to leave about 1.5 to 2 centimeters of zipper tape above the stoppers. Remove the excess teeth from the tape using your plier. The last step is to secure the end of your tape with fire! If you are underage, please make sure to have adult supervision for the next step. I beg of you, please. Using a lighter, lightly melt the end of your tape. Yeah, that's it. This will prevent them from fraying. And with that, your zipper is ready to be sewn into place. And this is really helpful, honestly, for any kind of costumes, not just for this one. So we'll be providing a separate video that only focuses on how to shorten the zipper for any future references for any potential costume. Unzip your zipper into 2 separate pieces. Right side to right side, align your zipper to the center front of the shirt, making sure to A, align the top of your zipper 3 to 4 millimeters below the notch of the collar. B, align the marking to the seam. And C, align to the bottom of the zipper 4 to 5 millimeters from your hem. Keep in mind that our hem does not have any seam allowance due to the nature of how it was cut on the shirt we worked with. If you do have a seam allowance, then align it 4 to 5 millimeters above the seam allowance. Pin in place and sew with a regular straight stitch 1 centimeter from the edge. Right side to right side, fold the collar in half at the center front and sew in place with a straight stitch 1 centimeter from the edge. Your zipper should be sandwiched between the 2 layers of fabric. Turn your collar inside out. Pin the hem of the 2 collars together. We'll be sewing them together by hand. You could also machine stitch them together with a straight stitch. I'm also pinning down my zipper tape and I'll be using a hidden whip stitch to hold it into place. All that's left on the shirt is to add your snaps to the armhole. Use your pattern as a reference to know where to place them. If unlike me you have a hem that you need to finish, please refer yourself to the instruction manual provided with the pattern. Given this particular situation, there was no hem for me to finish. Now we'll be moving on to the sleeve. Make sure to overlock the sleeve at the side seam. Also, always remember that we are sewing the left sleeve. Use your notches as visual reference to indicate the front and back. Right side to right side, align your sleeve at the side seams and sew in place with a straight stitch 1 centimeter from the edge. Iron your seam allowance open. Overlock your hem, turn it in by 1 centimeter and top stitch in place. We're using a slightly contrasting denim gray thread for some extra pizzazz. Take out your armhole facing for the sleeve. This should both be fully interfaced. Notice how I've already marked the placement of my snaps on my armhole. Fold your facing pieces right side to right side and sew them to themselves at 1 centimeter from the edge at the side seam. Set your armholes aside and bring back out your sleeve. You'll need to gather the crown area of your sleeve between the front single notch and the back double notch so that it fits with the length of the armhole. For more info on how to gather, please refer to our video on the subject. Align one of your armhole pieces to your gathered sleeve, right side to right side. Make sure to disperse the gathers evenly. Once your first armhole is pinned in place, align the other one in the same manner so that both armholes are right side to right side and that your sleeve is properly sandwiched in between. Sew in place 1 centimeter from the edge. Cut small notches into the concave area of the armhole. This would be along the armpit area. Make sure not to notch into your stitch when doing so. Once you're done, unfold both armhole pieces and align them along the hem. Once your hem is properly aligned, overlock them together and iron them flat. All that's left to do is sew in all your snaps as indicated on the pattern. And with that, your cloud shirt is completely done and you have a fully removable sleeve. Alright, so I hope this video tutorial was helpful. If you have any questions, please make sure to leave them in the comment section below. If you like this kind of content, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of all our upcoming content. Now, if you'd like to know more about our upcoming projects, then please feel free to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We post a lot of information there that we won't post on YouTube. Once again, we'd like to thank Lorentz for taking a chance on working with a small business such as ours. I mean, it's really appreciated. And I guess this wraps up today's video. Until next time, good luck with your projects, guys. Bye bye.